On Life and Meaning is brought to you by Blumenthal Performing Arts, celebrating its 25th year presenting the best in the performing arts, sharing and employing the arts as a major catalyst to strengthen education, building community cohesiveness, and advancing economic growth. Further support is provided by Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, one of America's leading urban public libraries, delivering exceptional services and programs with a mission to improve lives and build a stronger community. And by the Arts and Science Council, Charlotte Mecklenburg's resource hub and lead advocate for the regional cultural community, providing culture for all.
That happened to me through Truman Capote, through Gore Vidal, to Tennessee Williams, and then I fell into Kerouac. And when I got into the Beat Generation, that kind of, again, was another big snowball that probably lasted about 5 years. I now collect Kerouac, and I feel a weird kind of connection to his writing and to his voice. I'm not sure if it's the kind of French-Canadian thing going on, but yeah, it's just I tend to just, once I get into something, I'll explore it and pick it apart and pull it apart until there's almost nothing left but debris, and then I'll breathe and then kind of find the next thing, and then that'll all be put back together and then live somewhere.
Hope Muir is Artistic Director of Charlotte Ballet. She just completed her first season, which included the introduction of 8 new choreographers to the company, the creation of 5 new ballets, and 2 ballets making American premieres. Before joining Charlotte Ballet, Hope was Assistant Artistic Director at the Scottish Ballet. She has taught classical and contemporary dance at the National Ballet of Canada, English National Ballet, Rambert Dance Company, and Matthew Bourne's New Adventures Company. She had a 20-year career as a dancer. She was a founding member of London Festival Ballet School, then joined the company, now English National Ballet, before dancing for 10 years at the Rambert Dance Company in London, and later at Hubbard Street Dance, Chicago. In this episode, we explore the challenges and rewards of directing a ballet company, what she looks for in dancers, producing socially conscious repertoire, and the ideas that inform her work. I'm Mark Paris, and this is On Life and Meaning. Welcome, Hope.
Hello.
Hope, you've completed your first year as Artistic Director. How did the year go?
It was amazing and frightening and shocking and surprising, all of the above. I loved working with the dancers. I loved their enthusiasm, their openness to communicate, collaborate, and bare their souls for, some of the collaborators this year and the new work, and they've just taken it all in their stride. They've been absolutely fantastic. I surprisingly what I didn't anticipate was a sense of not being able to really live in the moment, because you're constantly moving on to the next thing. And this is something that took me a little bit by surprise in this first year, in that there's a sense of satisfaction after an opening night, after achieving something that's been on the calendar for 3 years. It's been fantastic, but immediately I don't ever have that kind of relax. It's immediately, okay, what's next? and that's taken me by surprise, because in my previous role as an assistant director, I didn't carry that full responsibility. So when we did get through a project, I felt like I did have a little bit of downtime where I could really pause and consider what had just happened and really take it all in. And I don't seem to have space for that in this current role. I think that I might get better at it. I might get more efficient. I might be able to take that time, because I think it's necessary to digest fully what's happened and to learn from it, and to perhaps find more efficient ways to do things. So It excites me that I think I can get better at it. But that's one thing that has taken me a little bit by surprise, is that inability to just be in the moment and allow it to kind of wash over you. And before you move on, I feel like I'm always moving on.
What does an artistic director do?
Wears many hats, many hats. And in America, even more hats than in Europe. I will plan the repertoire that the company will perform, and normally that starts with a 3 to 5 year plan. I will then speak to all of those people I hope to work with and open up the negotiations, open up the calendars, do all of that organizing. Once that is put into place, I will hand that off to people that are just better at that than me. And that allows me to get into my natural habitat, which is the studio. I love teaching. I love coaching. I love being involved in the staging and rehearsals of the performances. And then here in America, we also have to go out and do a lot of fundraising, which was new for me and something I wasn't sure if I would take to or if I would enjoy. But what I found is that I've approached it in a way of just trying to meet people and trying to build relationships and trying to build trust, and hoping that the work will get people enthusiastic about donating to the arts and not be, cumbersome or awkward. So I've kind of just put a slant on it in that I get to go out for dinner and lunch quite often, and that's nice, and it's a lovely way to actually get to know the community and to meet people here in Charlotte. Other roles of an artistic director, obviously a hand in the branding, in the marketing, in what we're putting out there, because now in this digital age, everything's out there forever. So you have to be really, really careful that you're sending the right messages, that your photos are representing the company in the best possible light. And so there's a lot. There's not enough hours in the day.
One of the signature works of the ballet was the production of The Most Incredible Thing. What would someone have experienced had they seen the show?
It is an assault on the senses. It's something that a lot of people were not anticipating to see in a family ballet. It has so many scenic elements. It has a video component. It has very loud music that was composed by the Pet Shop Boys, to a story that no one really knows. Hans Christian Andersen wrote over 3,000 fairy tales, and this one is probably the shortest at about 2 pages long, and we managed to get a ballet that was a full evening work. So it was it was pretty, I think, surprising for people to come to the ballet. I don't think they were expecting that kind of visual look on the stage.
What is significant about producing The Most Incredible Thing for this company?
When I was doing the first 3-year plan for my interview before I got the artistic directorship, one of the things that was important to me was to try and fulfill the family ballet criteria without using the old standards, the Walt Disney titles, the Cinderellas, the Sleeping Beauties. I wanted to try and find something new and find something fun and find something cool that would be a little bit more appealing to a wider range of children and families. And also giving them what they were expecting in terms of their entertainment, in terms of the video components of the things, the digital aspect of what children are doing in their lives. So I had that kind of brief in my head, and then came across, The Most Incredible Thing, which was choreographed by a colleague of mine, a colleague and a friend, Javier de Frutos. And I felt that it was important for Charlotte Ballet to do it, to also just expose the audiences here to a different way of storytelling and to basically kind of shake the perception of classical ballet. It's also a ballet that it's quite feminist in its production, in that, the princess at the end takes the power, and she's the rebellious little girl that, ends up with her happy ever after, but on her terms. So I thought that was also a really good message. And I also thought that it was just a really good time to push the organization in terms of a bigger production. It's like a Broadway show. It's a show. It's fantastic. All of the elements, all of the collaborators are such high rate artists, and all of the work and all of the elements come together to this amazing show that I just felt would elevate Charlotte Ballet in the community.
In these kinds of shows that have strong scenic and digital elements, is there a risk that the dance will be overwhelmed by the production values?
I think that, yes, there's always a potential risk for any element to outdo the dance in, whether that be music or lights or scenic. And I think that's just the genius of the people that came together for the most incredible thing, that the balance in it was absolutely perfect.
Charlotte Ballet also owns elements of the production, does it not?
Yes, it was actually funny story. When I first went to the original production company that did The Most Incredible Thing, which was Sadler's Wells, a theatre in London, I went and asked if we could rent the set and costumes to bring to Charlotte. And Alistair Spalding, their chief exec, kindly agreed to it, and then realized that they had all been destroyed. So we went on this crazy kind of mission to try and find any of the elements that had survived. Fortunately, in a warehouse in the East End of London, they discovered 3 boxes of costumes that Sadler's Wells didn't even know at the time they were storing. So they donated the costumes to us, but it meant that we had to completely rebuild. So everything was built in Charlotte, and which means now that we are the only company in the world that own the sets and the costumes for The Most Incredible Thing. It gives us a wonderful position to be in terms of the opportunity to tour. It was a very successful production here, and there's been a lot of international interest around it. If we get those opportunities to tour, we could take it on the road, we could take it overseas, we could maybe take it to some of the larger cities, the presenting cities in the US, which again just moves the brand of Charlotte Ballet a little bit further along and gives our dancers and our crew and all of our technical people the opportunity to travel, which is, as artists, which is one of the perks of the jobs.
Why is it important for Charlotte Ballet to tour?
This is a conversation that we've been having a lot here internally about the pros and cons of touring. I toured a lot in my career, and I kind of know and understand from a personal level why it was good for me as an artist. So just speaking about the pros for the dancers, obviously they get the opportunity to tour and to visit different cities and countries internationally. I mean, it's an exciting prospect. But the other thing is that you actually get to perform more. And you have to adapt to different audiences. You have to be sensitive to different cultures. You have to just physically being in different spaces change the way you work. And I feel that it just opens you up to how people receive art in different cities, different countries, how people interpret what you do, and it makes you a better listener in terms of when you're trying to decipher how you're going to pitch your performance. For the organization, I think just to get your brand out there and for people to see the high quality work that you are doing and the fact that you're doing something that no one else is doing, it's fantastically, hugely important to generate the interest so that we can bring back people to train in Charlotte. We attract and retain talent because of that. Dangers, cons, you're leaving your home, you're leaving your community, you know, there's a sense of abandonment there, and that's something that has to be discussed. It has to be thoughtfully, things need to be put into place so you don't just disappear for 2 or 3 months while you're touring. Does that mean that you have some kind of digital presence? Does it mean that your donors are able to see work before you go on tour? Everything happens first in Charlotte. That has to be, you know, a commitment we make to our community, to our donors here. It's important, but it is a balancing act.
Charlotte Ballet does not identify any of its dancers as principal dancers. Why not?
The hierarchy in a ballet company is so made for the traditional ballet companies where you have 40 to 60 dancers. And the reason I think, because I was in one of those companies, the reason I think it's important in those companies is because when you're asking one person, say out of 60, to carry a full evening show, to carry the narrative, to deliver the steps, to be the person everyone's looking up to do things that other people can't. Therefore, it defines that category of principal or quarter ballet or soloist. It clearly defines the role you're playing on that team, on that night. We're only 20. And yes, historically here, they have done some of the full-length ballets, classical ballet, Sleeping Beauty, etc., where 2 of our dancers will carry the show. But the next night, it's going to be another 2 and another 2 and another 2. And basically, by the end of it, I will have probably 10 dancers out of 20 that have all carried a show in one way or another. And that could even be in a contemporary ballet. So what I'm asking them to do here, I feel like I could ask any one of them to do. So they're kind of all principals, but I think that would be silly to call them all principals. So I just, they are valued for their individual talents and for the responsibilities that I request of them, and therefore I feel like we're better just as one.
Those dancers who might be exceptional and ambitious, is this the right place for them if they don't receive that recognition?
I think the recognition is in the work. I think the recognition is if I entrust a role to you and say that I feel that you can do this, and other choreographers come in and work with you and that same trust is given. When you're given that work, when you're given those roles, for me, I think that's enough for dancers. I don't think that dancers really need the titles. I've never felt that. And even when I was in a company that had them, it wasn't the be-all and end-all.
How are your more exceptional dancers recognized?
Well, when you carry a performance and, I'm putting you out front in the center for 3 acts over 3 hours, I think that's, how they're being recognized. And also, I don't, what I don't want to do is I don't want to say that one thing, doing Aurora, as challenging and as I have great respect for the classical roles, but I also feel like the more contemporary roles, the other styles that we work in, I still think that there is a substance in them that is as deserving as some of the classical roles. And what doesn't work is the hierarchy of the classical ballet company, for me, doesn't really translate into this hybrid company that we have, which does classical ballet and contemporary dance and neoclassical work. And they have to be able to they have to adapt. So it's very difficult for me to say that one is more important than the other.
Hope, I want to talk to you about dance as an art form that expresses ideas. Charles Weidman, a prominent mid-century American choreographer, famously said, "Real art can never escape life." One criticism of professional dance is that it expresses the individual feelings and ideas of choreographers and dancers, but shies away from addressing the issues of the world. What is the responsibility of an artistic director to connect what we see on stage to social reality at large?
I think there are 2 things that, there's 2 different approaches. I look at work that is, that escapism, that entertainment element that you're talking about, that is, traditionally, I think, what people think of when they think of ballet. In terms of the more hard-hitting subjects, they do exist. There are ballets that touch on some very sensitive issues. And I know that when I have participated or performed those ballets, the directors that I was working with at the time, they were very sensitive to how they would be placed in the program. Where are you going to insert that piece that people might not enjoy because it makes you think? Or, are we going to not do it when we go on tour to that place because it won't be received well? And it's about just having the balance and the sensitivity. I don't want to also go to the theatre and just be thrown into, a dark place for 3 hours. I feel that there's a balance, unless, you're selling it for that particular reason. There was just recently, I was in San Francisco at the Bourne Festival, and one of the young choreographers presented a work about gender identity, and I thought that was fantastic to be put on stage and performed in a very beautiful and eloquent way, quite a simple way, but with humor and beautifully danced, beautifully designed, and wonderful that he's, thinking about those subjects and making them a conversation point. So I do think that it is happening, and it has happened historically, and I think they can work in tandem together with balance and sensitivity.
Would Charlotte Ballet consider a production that explored gay or lesbian sexuality on stage?
We did. But not in such a way that we made a thing of it. And actually, I didn't make a thing of it at all. It wasn't until I got here and realized that some people might think that's what I was trying to do. It was in my very first program, and it was a piece that was made on me at Rambert, and it was called Elsa Canasta, and it opens with the most beautiful male love duet. Now, for me, it was always just a duet, and I hadn't ever really considered that it might look like a statement, or me trying to have a bigger conversation, afterwards, or it wasn't my intention. It's just a beautiful piece of choreography. So, and it was received for all intents and purposes very well. And I was very proud of the company to embrace it. And, and sometimes dancers even can be uncomfortable being asked to do something like that. And, I had to come into a company that I didn't know them very well. And again, just say, okay, this is what this duet is. And it's just like acting, isn't it? And it's not a comment on them. It's not a comment on what I think Charlotte needs to see. It is a comment on the fact that I want them to see good art and wonderful dancing, but it wasn't my intention.
Would you present good art that addressed issues like racism or politics or religion on stage?
Again, if it is done in a sensitive and clever way, I think, yes, I'm open to pretty much watching, going to any art gallery, going to see any film. All the things that you do in your life, I think that there's no reason they shouldn't be addressed through dance.
Hope, when you assess a dancer, what is more important to you? Physical capacity and technical prowess, or expression of psychological and emotional states?
It's a tough question, because obviously the first introduction to any new dancer is visual. You don't know them. The first thing you do is it's probably never having a conversation. The first thing you do is see them in a studio, standing at a bar doing a plie, or in class, or in a performance. And then you meet them. So it really is visual first. But if I'm seeing them in a performance, how they communicate with me that's what will spark my interest. And if it's in a class, I tend to be drawn to dancers that are very musical. I tend to be drawn to very coordinated dancers. That might sound really strange, but there's a lot of dancers that are really not coordinated. And that always astounds me. But when I see a natural coordination and a simplicity of technique, it's probably my starting point. And then I just want them super curious and super smart. And, that's then what gets me really excited, is when you get to know them and you see them, where their interests lie and how they react to you. I think my job is more about finding different ways to communicate with different people and trying to get the best out of them. So in a lot of ways, sometimes I'm drawn to people like the nut I can't crack, and I'm like, how am I going to get in? What language do I need to use to unlock you, to make you a better dancer, to help you evolve? So yeah, visually is obviously the first introduction. And then once I talk to them, it's kind of about, I want that curiosity and I want musicality. Oh gosh, the list goes on. We want everything.
Do you see any changes to who your dancers are in Charlotte Ballet?
When I arrived, I made no changes to the current roster of dancers. I wanted to work with everyone for the first year. I wanted to give everyone a fair shot. I wanted to get to know them, and I wanted us to go on this journey together. I have been through changes of artistic director in my career quite a few times, and I know how unsettling it can be for a group of people that have been together a while under the previous director. So I was really, really cognizant of trying to make it as, because I'm in the same boat as them, really. I'm coming in and not knowing, and they're not knowing. And rather than it separating us all, I just said, like, let's just do this together. And I was very fortunate that they all wanted to stay and that they were all excited about the new repertoire and the change. And then this year we've made a couple of changes, but not many. There's actually two dancers that have changed this year. So out of 20, to only have that small change, it's been great.
Do you see more changes on the horizon?
Not at the moment. I'm very happy with this group of dancers, and I feel that they work well together. And I think we're good. The dynamic is really good, and they're a happy group, and they're a hard-working group. So I'm thrilled.
Hope, actors, writers, and painters can all gain great power and nuance as they age. Dance seems to be about youth and athleticism. Is there space on stage for older dancers?
I think there is, and there should be. There have been historically a couple of companies that had specifically curated repertoire for a group of older dancers, one being Netherlands Dance Theatre 3. And they took these, you say old dancers, we're talking about people in their 40s probably, and they were doing work that was made for what they could do. And that's all it takes. All it takes is a director saying to a choreographer, well, I want you to work with this group of dancers. By the way, there are some older ones in there, so they're not going to be willing to, do all that floor work, for example, or jump on their knees or whatever. They'd have to be more sensitive. And in a way, a commission's a commission. Like if I say to a choreographer, well, I want you to make a 30-minute piece, and I want you to use Bach, and I want you to use these 10 dancers. I'm already setting boundaries for his creativity, or his or her creativity. But why couldn't you do that with age? He said, well, I really want you to use this dancer who's older. I mean, I found it frustrating as a dancer that just as I started to understand who I was as an artist and as a performer, my body decided to say, like, you're done. It was like, no, you can't do this anymore. But I was very fortunate not to have any serious injuries, but it was just it was just too hard. But that was because the work that I was dancing at that time was probably created for dancers that were just more mobile and younger. So I think there's opportunity. I think it's definitely a different strain from what we're doing here at Charlotte Ballet, but I don't think it's something that I would shy away from. And I would die to get back on stage in the right project. I'm just waiting for a Lady Capulet. That'll be it. I'll commission a Romeo and Juliet just so I can do Lady Capulet. Dance is tough. It's tough like that.
Who are contemporary choreographers that excite you, that you would like to bring to Charlotte Ballet?
There are so many amazing choreographers out there. And to quote my ex-boss, Christopher Hampson, who's the director of Scottish Ballet, he said to me, the hardest thing is just to know what not to do. There's just so much good work. I have a very personal connection to some choreographers that I've worked with, and others that I haven't, but I have met or encountered through my professional career. I'm a personal fan of Crystal Pite. She's a Canadian choreographer who has her own company called Kid Pivot. And I've been fortunate enough to have worked with her on a few occasions at the National Ballet of Canada. And she is, apart from being a genius in terms of creation and her choreography, she's just a beautiful, kind, smart woman and the most generous person in the studio that I've ever had the pleasure to work with. And I can't say enough good things about Crystal. I have worked with, there's too many wonderful choreographers out there. I mean, in the next few years, I'm hoping to, well, this next coming season, we're bringing in Mehdi Valeski, who's someone that comes from that Netherlands dance theater lineage, who I'm excited to bring to the States for his first time working with an American company, and a different style. But also, you know, on the classical side, I think that there are works that haven't really come stateside that are particularly British. I know that Ian Webb down in Sarasota Ballet is doing a lot of Ashton, but really is, you know, there's very little else that goes on in America. And, you know, Macmillan, the older stuff as well, the very classical stuff. So there's a lot I want to bring here. Like I said, it's what not to do.
You're doing a David Dawson piece next year, are you not?
Yes. Yes, David. I had the pleasure of working with David at Scottish Ballet. He made a Swan Lake for us, and I got on very well with David, and I assisted him all through that process. And, you know, it was Swan Lake. It's a big production. He was stripping it back. He made it very, very physical and demanding for the dancers. And he changes dancers. He really does. He's extraordinary in the studio. And I was fortunate enough that he allowed us to acquire a pas de deux. I'm going to be staging it. And yeah, and then the original cast will be coming over to coach, and then hopefully David will come here for when we get into theatre.
There are star choreographers who seem to have their work everywhere. What is the approach of Charlotte Ballet when you think about reaching out to these choreographers and bringing their work to Charlotte?
I have great respect for the Christopher Wheeldens and the Liam Scarletts and the Ratmanskys of the world. Great respect. Wonderful, wonderful artists. But I look at sometimes the landscape of the companies in the US, and I see a lot of companies doing a lot of the same work. And it's all great work. That's not my issue with it. What I want to do is I want to try and perhaps find a unique identity for Charlotte Ballet with a bespoke repertoire that's made for us, and try to find some new talent and try to mentor some new talent here from our dancers and from the community. So yeah, it's not intentionally not calling up the Mr. Wheeldens of the world, but it's intentionally just wanting to try and find something different.
Hope, you grew up in Toronto?
I did.
What do you remember about your childhood?
I remember, do you know what? It's funny you should ask that. I just remember, the first thing that popped into my head was, I just remember I used to ride my bike a lot. I remember going out in the morning and staying out all day through the summer holidays, and just riding my bicycle. And it was all that was the days where I used to have to be home when the streetlights came on. That was it. When the streetlights came on, you had to be back. And I just have a lot of memories of that in the summers, and I have a lot of memories of driving to dance classes and to dance competitions, and getting the bus to classes and competitions, and getting the bus in the snow to dance classes and competitions. Yeah. So it was, the summers were really idyllic. And then when we went back to school, and then it was right into dancing.
How would people have described you as a child?
I was I had a lot of energy, which is why I got put into dance classes. I was hyper, and I got put into dance classes to try and get rid of some of that energy. And my mum could have a few hours on her own to get the shopping done and do all the things that she needed to do more efficiently without me. Yes, active, precocious. I don't think I was annoying. But I think I could be frustrating at times because I would disappear a lot. I used to run away a lot. Not run away because I wanted to run away, but I would just, in a shopping mall or somewhere, I would be gone. Yeah, and used to be found in the front windows with the mannequins, undressing them or something. Yeah, I know, I was naughty.
What drew you to dance?
Well, that was it. It was my mum. My mum was a single mum, and she was trying to juggle the errands, and I was running away and finding myself in shop windows. So she said, we need to put you in something. So I started with ballet, which I hated. It was boring, and I could not be. It was like herding cats. I could not be rallied into a circle. I was like, no. So then I said, well, I'll stay in dance, but I want to do tap, because I thought, yes, I just wanted to make noise and ruin the parquet floors in our apartment. And then somehow between the tap and then I think I picked up jazz, I just got the bug. And luckily I was fairly good at it, even though outside of the studio I'm super, super clumsy. And somehow that managed to escape the performing side of it for me. But yeah, the bug caught on, and then I started doing the competition circuits in Toronto, and yeah, it was fun. It just became a part of the fabric of our life, and I was then probably dancing 3 or 4 nights a week, and then all day on Saturday, and all these little local studios. You're then in like the junior company and then the senior company, and then I was really involved. And then I started teaching tap when I was very young in the school as a teaching assistant, and gosh, it served me so well, because all of these styles ended up coming back in my career once I went into ballet full time and then had the classical career. Once I started doing the more contemporary repertoire, all of those skills that I first did all started to creep back into the language, which was extraordinary and so useful.
Was there someone who played a particular role in your development?
I think in the early studio days, my ballet teacher, she was frustrated with me because I think she saw I had potential, but I really wasn't. My heart wasn't in it. And if I'm honest, as wonderful as it was, all that stuff at the local schools in Toronto, it was fantastic. I don't really think I believed in myself or my classical potential until I got to London. And I think there was a turning point for me also mentally, because it was my decision to go into classical. I think that I was being stubborn in my youth, because I just didn't want to be told what to do. And ballet just did seem really boring, even at 11 and 12. So it wasn't until I was 16 that I went into full-time ballet education, which is probably seems quite late. But I kept juggling all of the balls of all the different styles up until then.
Hope, you did move to London at the age of 16 and joined the London Festival Ballet School, and then auditioned for the English National Ballet. What did you learn there about yourself as a young dancer?
It was a very pioneering time, that time with London Festival Ballet. Peter Schaufis was the director, and he was a internationally acclaimed dancer. And he decided, as artistic director of London Festival Ballet, that he wanted to start a school. So the school was a complete experiment. And he wanted a very different model, which was he wanted 5 women and 5 men. And they were going to be trained on site within the company's environment. And they would share the resources. So we were in their building, we would do class before the company. And then in their lunch hour, we would do our other repertoire classes, solos, modern, whatever we were doing. So that was my first experience of doing a big audition. So there was over 400 people. And like I said, Peter chose 5 women and 5 men, and I was lucky enough to be one of them. As soon as I went into the company, I think I was out on tour with the company doing Swan Lake within like 3 months. It was such quick tutorials in how to just get on with it. But it was extraordinary in that somehow you felt prepared. I mean, just having that confidence of Peter choosing me. And the 5 of us were also different, the 5 women. We were also different in terms of our height, our look, our skills. he didn't want a school to make a quarter ballet. He said he wanted a school to make soloists, and we all looked completely different and could do different things. And in a weird way, it's kind of not sustainable, that kind of a school, because it doesn't make any money. It's time constraints on the studio. It's trying to, it's not sustainable. So unfortunately and fortunately, English National Ballet School, as it now is, has evolved to a much bigger monster. But weirdly and sadly, that first 2 years, the 10 of us, we all had careers. So when you look at that 100% rates of getting jobs and staying in the industry, I've stayed in the industry, and there's other people from that 10 that have stayed in the industry. It's remarkable. And, that was Peter's vision, and it's quite extraordinary and quite pioneering, even though in the end, not completely sustainable. So I never had to audition for English National Ballet. So I only did that one big audition to get into the school, and then I was taken into the company.
You then moved to the Rambert
yeah.
Dance Company, a contemporary dance company in London. Is there a particular performance of yours you remember at the Rambert?
I was there 10 years. It was a long time, but the transition was important to me because I had spent 5 years at English National Ballet and really had done so much dancing. English National Ballet is a big touring company, and we used to tour a lot, and we would do a lot of shows. So I really got my stripes in terms of I've pretty much done every role in that Nutcracker and every role in that Nutcracker. And, it's like hundreds of Nutcrackers, hundreds of Giselles, hundreds of La Sophie. There's been so many ballets, and I'm so grateful for all that dancing. But once I had done my first principal role, which I was so astonished and grateful to get, I kind of switched gears, and I suddenly was like, I want to do more contemporary work, and I want work made on me now, and I want to do stuff that's of today rather than, the older classics. So Christopher Bruce, who was taking over Rambert Dance Company in 1994, he had been the resident choreographer at English National Ballet, and he's known me since I was 17 years old when we met then. So I just sent a letter and said, I'd like to come and audition. That was audition number 2. I had to go on a Sunday. I remember we were doing Sleeping Beauty in Liverpool, and I came back on the bus on the Saturday night, and I had to go into the Chiswick Studios in Rambert to do a classical class and then a contemporary class and then some repertoire. And then I was fortunate enough to get in. So I made the move in 94 when Christopher took over, and I was with him for his entire directorship and stayed at Rambert for 10 years.
The Rambert has announced a global search for a new artistic director. Are you interested?
Well, you surprised me with that one. It's in my heart, Rambert, and it is a wonderful company that has fantastic potential, a wonderful body of historical work, and a wonderful insight into young choreographers and opportunity. When it came up, one does always go, oh, but like they say in England, whenever there's one bus, there's always 3. You wait half an hour, another one will come along. So I am hugely excited to see what happens at Rambert, and I know that whoever they select will do a fantastic job, and I'll always watch that company with great interest and respect.
Hope, is this a stepping stone job for you?
A lot of people have asked me that question because I've come halfway across the world to a new city, to a small company, but I see great potential here. And if I can educate and open up what we do to the community and for them to really take this ride with us and to be open to a little bit of change and, but maintaining that classical integrity, I think that I can do really wonderful things here, and I feel that this is a good size for me in terms of the size of the company. I feel that there's enough potential to keep me to keep me interested, because that's something that's super important, is that I have to stay interested in dance to do this job well. I have to go out and still get excited by it. And as soon as I feel that I can't do that here anymore, that would be when my time would probably naturally come to an end.
If a National Ballet Company called, would you take the call?
There's such a big responsibility in those big companies. They're monsters. And I have such an interest in contemporary dance as well as classical dance that I like kind of doing what I do on this smaller scale. I'm not sure that big company, that big, 70, 80 dancer company is something that I would be able to relate to anymore. I mean, the people that do it are extraordinary, but I'm just not sure that I have that relatability to it anymore.
From the Rambert, you went to the Hubbard Street Dance Company in Chicago. Is dance in America different than it is in the UK?
I've never really thought about dance being different in different cities or been attracted to cities before the dance. What's always attracted me, and I know a lot of my other colleagues say the same thing, is you tend to go to where the work is, where the repertoire is that you want to dance. So my reasons for going to Hubbard Street were because there was people that the artistic director was employing that I wanted to work with. And when I got there and had the amazing opportunity to work with those choreographers, I then was able to kind of look around and then maybe see, oh, this is a bit different, that's a bit different. There's funny little things, like I just thought that there would be live music, because at home it's if it can be live, it is live, and it wasn't. And I remember rocking up to the first show going, oh, where's the band? And they're like, no, that's what we were rehearsing to in the studio. So I had to really train myself to start to listen to the music differently, because when you have a rehearsal CD or whatever track you're using, once you know it so well, it's passive listening, because you just know it. And that's the thing about performing with live music, is that you have to be present, you have to be engaged in order to make it work, not just for you, but for everyone else on stage. And yeah, that was a big thing that was different. The approach in the studio was, that was all very familiar. I had an amazing time, met some amazing people there. And then I looked at Chicago, which I loved. It's a beautiful city. I love the architecture and enjoyed that aspect of it. So yeah, I never really think about dance being different in different places. It tends to be about the repertoire and the players.
I understand that you are drawn to masterworks across genres in music, literature, and fashion. What informs you intellectually?
I think I'm a bit of an old fuddy-duddy. I tend to so my mother was very young when she had me, and she was probably the coolest person in terms of her musical experiences. She'd seen Elvis, she'd seen the Beatles, I was just like, I had enough of you. So I decided to go a completely different route. Then I started getting into classical music, and in terms of what I listen to, it's Frank Sinatra and it's Mel Torme. And I mean, she just couldn't believe I was actually related to her when this was coming out of my bedroom as a child. So I've always felt I've had a bit of an old soul. And I tend to get onto tangents where I'll read something or I'll hear something, and then it just snowballs. And I'll go through periods, whether it be 6 months or 2 years, of finding a connectivity between a writer that I end up then reading everything, and I get to another writer through that writer, and then I'll just stop and I'll breathe for a period of time until I find the next snowball. That happened to me through Truman Capote, through Gore Vidal, to Tennessee Williams, and then I fell into Kerouac. And when I got into the Beat Generation, that kind of again was another big snowball that probably lasted about 5 years. I now collect Kerouac, and I feel a weird kind of connection to his writing and to his voice. I'm not sure if it's the kind of French Canadian thing going on, but yeah, it's just I tend to just, once I get into something, I'll explore it and pick it apart and pull it apart until there's almost nothing left but debris, and then I'll breathe and then kind of find the next thing, and then that'll all be put back together and then live somewhere.
There is something fun you do. You like to dog sled.
I do. It's probably the most relaxing, invigorating, wonderful thing. Yeah, I've discovered, and I look forward to. I love winter, and I look forward to every winter, and that's kind of on my bucket list, is to eventually have 2 dogs that will pull me around. So,
Last question.
Okay.
What do you value most?
I value the relationships that I've made. It's hard not to connect a lot of people to my career, but the relationships I've just formed in my life, my relationships with colleagues, my mentors, I've just had such extraordinary luck to have worked with so many amazing people, and I value the time that they have given me. I value honesty that they've given me, and confidence. So those relationships kind of gave me the courage and the strength to do what I do. And my grandparents, my mother, my aunt, and then, friends, the friendships. I think, what's it all about if you don't have anyone to call and tell it about you?
Thank you for your time today, Hope.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Hope Muir is Artistic Director of Charlotte Ballet. She is a graduate of the London Festival Ballet School. And now, a personal word. My conversation with Hope Muir marks the 50th episode of On Life and Meaning. Like Hope Muir, who explores new tangents, who is curious about what there is to know, so every episode of this podcast explores a new tangent and is an opportunity to learn something new. Dance has caught my attention. I've always been amazed at what dancers can do, their strength and flexibility and stamina, how they can remember dance steps, the split-second timing and coordination of jumps, their graceful, powerful bodies. I've appreciated ballet as sport, impressed at what the body can do, at the performance and competition of it, even if the dancer is competing with her or himself to test personal limits. I've appreciated dancers as athletes. One thought that always crosses my mind when I see a performance is that ballet dancers are platonic ideals of the human form, with their perfectly postured, sinewy bodies. They are gods and goddesses, separate and apart from mere mortals, from the rest of us, from me, the people in the audience who clap and then struggle to get out of their seats. I watch dancers on stage and wonder how I might walk through the world if I had their strength and grace. I wonder how they do it. I wonder how our entire nation might be different if we were all dancers. Dance is a new tangent, and there are so many things about it I find interesting. I am learning to appreciate it more fully as art. I am interested in its history, how ballet, as we know it today, began during the Renaissance in Italy, how the terms ballet and ball, as in masked balls, comes from the Italian word ballare, to dance, how when Catherine de' Medici of Italy married the French King Henry II, she introduced early dance styles into the court life of France, how ballet rose to prominence during the reign of Louis XIV, how the official terminology and vocabulary of ballet was gradually codified in French, how the creative center of ballet became Russia, how 19th century Romanticism informed recognizable heroines, how dance exploded and expanded in form and technique throughout the world in the 20th century. I am interested in the great impresarios and choreographers of ballet, from the classical dance tradition of Marius Petipa to Sergei Diaghilev to George Balanchine, to the pioneers of modern dance, from Martha Graham to Merce Cunningham to Paul Taylor, to 21st century choreographers from Alexei Romansky to Christopher Wheeldon to David Dawson. I am interested in the dancers, the ones who have become stars, whose names have become part of popular culture. From dancers from the past, the men, Vaslav Nijinsky, Rudolf Nureyev, and Mikhail Baryshnikov, and the women, Margot Fontaine, Agnes de Mille, and Marguerite Porter, to contemporary dancers blazing the stage, Natalia Osipova, Marianella Nunez, and Misty Copeland. Who are these people? What are their stories? How and why did they become famous? I am interested in what makes a good dancer and a good dance. What are the standards of the form? What is a good line, a good shape, a good turn? What are the great productions, the great roles? What makes for a good Swan Lake, a good Giselle, a good Sleeping Beauty? Does a dancer want to dance the roles of Odette and Aurora as an actor might want to take on Hamlet or King Lear? Once done with those roles, do dancers want to portray real life and real people, never to dance those roles again? I am interested in the lives of dancers, how they train and prepare, how they devote their lives to their art, how they fight for it, how they endure pain and test limits, how they worry and rally, how they maintain youth in their legs and finish well, how they become something else on stage. When my daughter was young, she took ballet and modern dance classes at the North Carolina Dance Theater, the precursor to Charlotte Ballet. I would see her stretch at the bar, accept instruction, practice with classmates, and dance in recitals. She went about her dance diligently, even though it was not a passion or particular talent she had. I appreciated dance for what it meant in her life at the time, a discipline, an activity that would strengthen her body and help her develop poise and confidence. My daughter went on to other interests. As a family, we went on to other interests. It is an interest that we have rekindled. What I saw then, and what I see now, as I look at young dancers in the studios of Charlotte Ballet, as I see the main company on stage, are athletes and artists who are guiding the evolution of dance forward, who challenge what is possible, who tell us what is human. The great joy of this podcast for me is meeting so many incredible people. It is the most incredible thing. Hope Muir shows us who we are and what we can do. This is Mark Paris, and you've been listening to On Life and Meaning. Additional support for this podcast is provided by the UNC College of Arts and Architecture, celebrating a decade of creative education in the arts and design. Thank you to our funding partners, and to my teammates, Andy Go, producer of the show, and to Chris Curriton, art and media director. This is how you can help. Please write a review on iTunes. It helps us grow our audience. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And become a patron. We are on Patreon, a crowdsourcing platform that allows you to support what you value at a level you choose. Visit us also on our website on lifeandmeaning.com. Thank you for listening.